I live in Pripyat, in the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. I came to this quiet woodland region several months ago after graduating from the Moscow Engineering and Physics Institute to work as a technician at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. But my peaceful life turned into unimaginable chaos just over a week ago, on the morning of the 26th of April, 1986. When the unit I worked on, the Unit 4 reactor, was destroyed in a horrible accident. As the surrounding areas are evacuated due to dangerously high levels of radiation released from the exposed reactor core, I remain here along with my fellow power plant workers, scientists, firefighters, and many others, all desperately trying to make sense of what went wrong, while helping to contain the fires, stabilize the area, and contain the radiation. In this terrible week, I've watched many people suffer the effects of acute radiation poisoning. Headaches, nausea, fever, confusion, seizures. I am fortunate to have not yet experienced the worst of these symptoms. While only a few died from the actual explosion, several have died from the radiation. As nuclear engineers and scientists, this is shocking. No one has ever died as a result of nuclear power's radiation. Now it is happening by the dozens. We all believed nuclear power to be extremely safe. As the days go on and I see more of my colleagues hospitalized, I worry. Will I succumb to this disaster too? However, I hardly have the time or energy to think about my own health. As I was part of the team in the control room at the time of the accident, it is impossible not to feel guilty. Was there something more I could have done? I replay the events of that night over and over in my mind, and I try to understand what went wrong. The night of the 25th of April, it was business as usual. I showed up for my shift and changed into my white lab coat and cap. Our unit, Reactor 4, was scheduled for routine maintenance. My colleagues had decided this shutdown would be a great opportunity to simulate a power outage and to test whether or not sufficient electrical power could still be generated to the cooling pumps by the reactor's slowing turbine. I knew that they had previously tried and failed this test just last year. However, new voltage regulators had been developed since then, so we were hopeful it would be a success this time. Looking back now, how could we have been so hopeful? No one had coordinated our test plan with the safety personnel, nor discussed the possible damages. For example, the test required us to shut off the emergency core cooling system. Perhaps if we had stricter safety protocols in place, we wouldn't have even gone through with this test. Or maybe it wasn't just the test. Maybe it was doomed from the start. The shutdown did not go smoothly. In the beginning, the core's power levels fell to unacceptably low levels, around 30 megawatts thermal, MWT. For our test, the reactor should have been stabilized at 700 to 1000 MWT, much, much higher. Because of this, some operators wanted to abort the test. As a relatively new technician, I wasn't sure what was the right thing to do. Now it is almost painful to think we were so close to preventing this disaster. But it wasn't my decision to make, nor was it any of my coworkers. The Deputy Chief Engineer, Anatoly Dyatlov, demanded the operators continue with this test. This created tension in the control room. Some of this faded by 1 a.m. when power did stabilize, though only at around 200 MWT. This was technically still too low for the test. Nonetheless, we continued to prepare for the test. Cooling pumps were switched on, and the reactivity decreased. We then began having difficulty with the steam drum and system pressure levels, so we disabled the automatic trip systems. As parameters stabilized more, we closed the emergency stop valves. We were about to officially start our test. To begin, I closed the turbine feed valves, thus allowing the turbine to coast. For a moment, everything seemed just fine. Then the control rods began to be inserted into the reactor. These rods worked to slow the rate of fission in the reactor, but we did not have many in use at this time, maybe just 6 to 8, because we had removed them when the power was too low at the start of the shutdown. This would prove to be a huge mistake. Suddenly, there was a rapid increase in the power levels of the reactor's core, and pushing the scram button only made it worse. Runaway power heated the coolant water and increased steam pressure, the control rods jammed, and fuel elements ruptured. That's when a powerful explosion ripped through the core, followed by a second explosion. Black and red dust filled the control room. Latch doors were blown open. The radiation monitors burned out, gauges flickered and gave confusing readings, and fires broke out in the plant. Everyone was in disbelief, as we soon realized we did not have the protocols in place for this kind of emergency. Dyatlov ordered the smoke exhaust fans and emergency cooling pumps activated. He believed if we could still get the control rods into the core, we could still stabilize the reactor. After disconnecting the servo drives to the rods in the backup control room, he sent a couple of trainees to attempt to manually force the jammed control rods into the core by hand, a futile task. Nothing worked. Communication lines had been severed, and we were joined by workers from Unit 3 to describe the damage they'd witnessed. Many of us had been badly scalded by the escaped steam, which had likely pressurized and created the forceful explosion. Fires had started from ejected fuel in Unit 3 and 4. Unit 4 Central Hall's roof had been blown off, and the cooling circuit was nearly all but gone. Outside, the ground was littered with destroyed graphite blocks, chunks of concrete, sparking and ripped electrical cables, and fuel. A plume of smoke and debris had been blown a kilometer into the air. Dyatlov was in denial. He was certain that the explosion was simply caused by the emergency tank, but the evidence in the aftermath was clear. We all knew the worst had happened. The top of the containment structure had blown open, and the reactor's radioactive core was open and exposed to the atmosphere. Workers responded quickly to shut down nearby Unit 3's reactor. Off-duty staff were called in for support. Firefighting units arrived. By dawn, many workers had been taken to the medical unit due to the radiation poisoning, including Dyatlov. Maybe it is short-sighted and wrong of me to try to place blame on any of my co-workers' actions or even on myself. After all, I am just a young junior-level technician. Maybe it is even wrong to put all the blame on Dyatlov. Maybe others are just trying to be kind to me, as they know I was in the control room at the time. But many have spoken to me about their other theories. They say it could be the design of this specific type of reactor which led to its demise. Though that seems like an even scarier possibility because it means there could be even more disasters like this one if we don't make corrections to the design. Reactor 4, just like other units at this facility, was an RMBK-class reactor that used enriched uranium as its fuel. These RMBK reactors are common here in the Soviet Union, but not throughout the rest of the world. Some of the RMBK's unique features include graphite moderators, which help to sustain a continuous fission reaction, coupled with its use of light water to cool a fuel. These reactors produce both plutonium and electric power. The RMBKs also have something called a positive void coefficient. When there is an increase in steam in the core, the reactivity increases as well, making them highly unstable at low power. In contrast to this, most Western reactors have negative void coefficients, which respond steam increases with a decrease in reactivity. It is this positive void coefficient that is central to a popular theory among technicians here, that the runaway power output which led to the ultimate destruction of Reactor 4 was caused by a dangerously large void coefficient due to excess production of steam. Some even complain that the containment structure was insufficient to keep the radioactive core fortified and protected from contaminating the environment. Still, others blame politics. They point out that our leaders, both our superiors at the plant as well as politicians, did not prioritize safety, as there were no emergency preparedness plans nor strict procedures to follow in the event of a meltdown. Many, myself included, believe we are too isolationist from the rest of the world's scientific community. Perhaps it was just a perfect storm of design weaknesses, poor decisions, and a lack of oversight. Either way, I don't know how we will sort through this mess to solve it precisely. What does the world think of us? Do Western scientists think we are inept because of this horrible disaster? As we have been so isolated from our fellow engineers and scientists during the Cold War, I can only hope that this disaster will warm our relations with the Western scientific community. Together, we can better search for answers, support, and prioritize safety. Have we ruined the health and safety of thousands here in our town, or of the millions that will be in the path of this massive wind-blown trail of radioactive debris? As the fuel's uranium atoms shatter, they break down into radioactive iodine, which has now been released and deposited into the surrounding area's earth and water. This radioactive iodine that makes its way into fresh milk from the dairy farms here can lead to thyroid problems and cancer. Will civilians across the globe, as they read the news headlines about this alarming event, now become opposed to the use of nuclear energy? As a scientist, this is perhaps the most unfortunate thought. Nuclear energy promises to be cleaner, cheaper, more efficient, and safer. Despite these last horrible days, I believe it still can be the future of energy. But will public outcry prevent all this? Before this disaster, I had been so excited to come to work every day. But now this plant looks like a hellscape. It has been over a week and the fires continue to burn. Tons of neutron-absorbing and thermal-controlling compounds such as dolomite, boron carbide, lead, sand, and clay are dumped from the helicopters and onto the damaged reactor. I work with other technicians and scientists to investigate what went wrong and to engineer a system that could feed cold nitrogen to the reactor space. Hopefully, this will cool temperatures and slow the radionuclide release. We also plan to entomb the reactor's remains with concrete in order to lock in the radiation from further contaminating our atmosphere and groundwater. There is so much work to be done, and much of it quite dangerous, but we must act quickly. As I return for another day to help, I'm exhausted. Suddenly, I develop a terrible pounding headache. Is it just stress? I've been taking potassium iodine pills as a precaution against the radiation for the past several days. But it seems it's no longer enough. I'm weak, dizzy, and I can't even remember what I'm doing here. Someone notices that I look confused, and a medic comes to evaluate me. He confirms what I feared, that now I am suffering serious effects of acute radiation poisoning and must be hospitalized. I can only hope I am luckier than those we have lost so far.